Real Estate Excellence Podcast special edition show today, as I have two of the most respected real estate attorneys in the studio today, Rose Alberre and David Heekin of Landmark Title. Our discussion today is focused on the buyer's broker agreement that will become required August 17th, this coming Saturday. After announcing this show, many agents that have been a guest gave me a lot of questions. So we're going to go through those questions because it's going to lead us really into a lot of what this is all about and obviously the concerns. I would recommend to all agents, if you still have questions or want further clarification of the guidelines, call the Florida Realtors hotline and go on their YouTube page because there's great videos there as well. Rose and David, welcome to the show. Welcome to the hot seat.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
This, our pregame discussion here of everything, discussions are going to go on for months, I think, through a lot of this and working through. And I know, David, you give your cell phone number out to a lot of people. You're going to be called probably every day, several times a day for the next few months until we start working. Well, of course, you guys are doing a lot of trainings, though. You're trying to get everyone up to speed, but
we've been training for the last several months. We started right off the bat, both with the FAR contract changes and starting to talk about buyer broker agreements, just to get the conversation going, because people had so many questions, and it was only a few weeks ago that these forms came out, so there was a lot of anxiety. So just trying to think through it with people is really what we've been doing for the last few months.
So for those who don't know David and Rose, like I said, give you guys a little 30-second elevator pitch of who you are.
Well, thanks. So I'm David Heekin. I'm the CEO and owner of Landmark Title. We are the #1 market share title company in Northeast Florida for the past 11 years. Got a fantastic staff. Rose is our general counsel and has been huge in helping us get ready for all the changes that are coming up.
Yeah.
Yes, as David said, I am the general counsel at Landmark Title. I've been an attorney for, aging myself here, over 20 years. I started out doing civil litigation until I found my niche in real estate, and I love it.
Excellent. And Landmark Title just being so highly respected in the area. August, I wanted to just go through, the first question I had written down here, because I think what does antitrust mean? The whole lawsuit, and because that's the language that's thrown out there. Oh, that might be a violation of antitrust. How does it apply here?
So the main thing is the jury rendered a $1.78 billion verdict because they found evidence that sellers were being, I don't want to say the word tricked, but that the allegation was, the arguments were made that there was a conspiracy to fix brokerage commissions. So antitrust, anti-competition, that is what the violation stemmed from, and the jury found that they were guilty of.
They lost the trust of the consumer.
Yes.
And
that's what the jury found. Was
it more the sellers or the buyers? Because I think in most cases, like you said, there was agents out there we know that were saying, "Oh, my commission's not going to come out of your pocket. Don't worry about that." Right?
Yeah.
That
was one of the arguments. But the sellers, their argument was that the brokerages, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and a lot of the named brokerages, that they were conspiring to fix commissions in violation of the antitrust, anti-competition laws.
Okay. I'm gonna have to just pull that mic a little bit closer to you. Yeah, yeah. Good. All right. Some of the things I want to put down as facts that I don't, again, listening at the mastermind, feeling these questions, and you guys tell me if you agree or disagree. The MLS, your local MLS, whoever is in charge of compliance and enforcement.
Correct.
For this. Okay. Because I want everyone to, because we Rose and I, you were talking the term legally, and obviously the DOJ has their hands in it, but really your local MLS is technically the police at this point. And if you think someone's violating this agreement, you're going to report it to the MLS.
For now, yes.
Yes. The buyer's broker agreement can be amended, and we talked a little bit at any time. We talked a little bit about pre-show and watching some videos. There's recommendations of when or when not to amend it. EXP was recommending, their lawyer says, don't do it after you actually go see the house because it might look like a bait and switch. Mm-hmm. But there is nothing that says you can't.
There's nothing that says you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's a contract like any other contract, but of course you have to think of the practical effect too. You know, I mean, people are struggling to have that conversation. Are you going to want to have it multiple times? I think get it right the first time and explain it. Prove your worth.
The obvious is the buyer side's commissions cannot be displayed on anything related to the MLS. You know, we talked about flyers. If they download from the internet, as there's many software programs out there for lenders that we can go on and see what a particular agent's listening to and say, hey, we'll create a flyer for you. Well, that's pulling from the MLS, and it can't have anything referred to commissions. And right now, today, most of them don't even have anything for concessions either. But from what I'm understanding, concessions will come in where if they're offering 3% to help a first-time buyer with their closing costs or something.
Yeah, there are many ways off of MLS that you can negotiate compensation. We've spoken about some of them. You can look at the NAR frequently asked questions, watch the videos on the NAR resource website. There are lots of ways to do it. And one way that we've been talking about is the website that we talked about too, the Pie Slice. If no one has heard of this yet, I strongly encourage you to go to www.thepieslice.com. I recently did a demo and I was so impressed because it's hard enough as a busy real estate agent to keep track of your negotiation communications with other agents. This is one place where you can go. You type in the listing agent's contact info, the property address, and it automatically generates the conversation. All you need to do is fill in fields. You just fill in fields and it asks the question. It's amazing. It's a template, and it transcribes the conversation, the negotiations for you. And then once you reach an agreement, you can even right away print out the compensation agreement, filled out, have it signed before you even tour home.
David, do you agree with having an agreement like that?
Yeah, I haven't done. I have not. I was not able to. I was out of town. I wasn't able to sit in on the webinar that she sat in on. But I've heard really good things about it. So it's certainly one way to do it. I mean, as long as it's not through the MLS or the IDX feed, so Zillow or Redfin or anything like that.
IDX
it can be flyers in the flyer box. It could be right on the sign. It could be taped to the front door. It could be on the kitchen counter. It can be on the website. It could be through email. They could just
call each other and exchange, but the Pie Slice is actually ones that you need to negotiate. Some of them may be just straight out, hey, we're going to have a 2.5% or 3% buyer side agent incentive. It's there.
Well, and the one thing I really love about it is it's private. It's just between you and the listing agent. You can invite viewers such as the buyer or your broker to watch the conversation. They can't participate, but there's one school of thought that people don't want to just blanket advertise what they're offering on a property because it's a negotiable term of every offer. So if you're getting a cash quick close at full asking price, you might want to pay a higher commission on an offer like that as opposed to, one that you highly doubt will close. So this is one where you're not advertising to the world what a seller is willing to pay.
But I would imagine if someone challenged it or said, hey, what's going on? You guys are violating antitrust. You're working behind the scenes. You could actually print off the conversation.
You have a whole transcript and you can invite the consumer to watch the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah. The funny thing is the whole part of the DOJ was they wanted things to be more transparent, but is it really more transparent now? I mean, I think it was transparent when it was on the MLS. I think that they taking it off that, I can understand getting rid of clear cooperation, but they just made things, they muddied the water, I think, for the consumer.
Well, they wanted the buyer to know, right? In most cases, the seller knew that 5, 6, whatever percent was going out of their proceeds. The buyer didn't know squat, and now it forces the buyer broker. Now, what did it coming off the MLS forced it? They could have just said, no, you need buyer broker agreement, in my opinion.
Right.
And I'm sure you know this, Tracy. Other states have been doing the buyer broker agreement for years. I don't know what the number is, but
About
it's like
20
around
or so.
20 or something. States that have been doing it for years without any issues. Commercial, we all know the commercial sector. This is how they operate. So it's not. It's
just going to take some getting used to.
It's a different way. Just taking. We just have to get used to it.
And it's going to be bumpy while we find that new normal.
That's it.
I do anticipate a bumpy few months while people figure out what are best practices. How do I have the conversation with the seller on the listing side? How do I have the conversation with my buyer on the buyer side? How do I mend it if I find a house that I agreed I was going to take 2, but now they're offering 3, and now I'm going to go to amend it with my buyer, and the buyer's going to say, wait a minute, that 1%, what's my cut of that? Things like that. There's just going to be a lot of
how you handle it.
Yeah, how you handle it.
That is one of the questions that several people, what is a simple and compliant way? I think, to me, is just telling them the truth. Just
Always.
Be straight up.
The truth shall set you free.
Yeah. Just be straight up. This is the new requirements now. I need to let you know what I am being compensated here. And this will be an ongoing discussion.
Yep.
But there are traps for those who are not staying in the loop, who are not watching the webinars, who are not reading the materials that are coming out. And one thing, if you can take away one thing from this podcast, it is you never want to be in a situation where you present an offer without having either a signed compensation agreement, and there are 2 forms, one between the seller and the buyer's broker and one between the seller's broker and the buyer's broker. You have to have that form signed either before you submit an offer or when you submit the offer. You want to make sure there's a term in the offer that makes it contingent on the seller signing the compensation agreement form simultaneously with the offer, or otherwise the contract is deemed null and void. Because if you submit an offer and the seller accepts it and they don't accept the compensation agreement, you lose all that. There's you're out. I mean, your buyer will be paying it.
Before I forget, just so for my sponsor, Remy Graphics. Most of us know Dunya. They make these nice mugs here with my logo on there. Remy Graphics, RemyGraphics.com. Remy, Dunya, we love you. And
she's great.
She will make one-offs, these for your closing gifts, these nice mugs.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Where you could put John and Sally, welcome to Jacksonville or whatever.
Oh, nice.
So you can really personalize your closing. Now, she makes other laser engraved gifts. This is just one.
So that's a pink one, so that means I get it?
I still haven't got my Landley lit. So I was promised by Britt, but I haven't seen it yet.
The new season is out too.
I'll make sure you get one.
Back to what we were talking. The last statement. I'm sorry, because I had a question I was going to do, but I didn't want to forget to.
A word from our sponsor.
About the compensation agreement and the offer.
Making sure you have that signed before.
Or making your offer contingent on it being signed prior to the effective date of the contract.
Right. Now, I guess, one fact that's there as well with the buyer's broker agreement, if you agree with your buyer, your consumer, that you're only going to get 2% and the seller's offering 3%, you either need to have to amend that or you're going to take the lesser of the 2.
100%. So one of the big new practice changes is you have to have a buyer broker agreement. And the buyer broker agreement has to have certain elements, terms, in order to be in compliance with the practice change. One of the things is that there has to be a disclosure in there that the compensation that you receive from any source cannot exceed the amount that is agreed to or authorized by the buyer broker agreement.
And you can't have a range.
No range.
No ranges.
It cannot be.
What's that lawyerly word there? Lawyerly phrase.
Well, objectively, it has to be objectively ascertainable.
Yes.
It cannot be open-ended. The settlement agreement actually gives an example saying that it can't be whatever amount the seller offers. It cannot be between X% and Y%. It can't be up to an amount. It has to be objectively ascertainable and not open-ended.
And objectively ascertainably just means any simple person can look at that document and say you're getting paid X percent.
Exactly.
Either a
or
flat
certain
fee, right, or a percent.
Right.
You can have a range of services. So I think there was some confusion because some people said, "Oh, well, I saw an attorney on a podcast say you can do a range. If you can say, I'll get paid 3% for doing X, Y, and Z. I'll get paid 2% for doing, A, B, C." So you can spell it out so that way they know, okay, if I ask you to do this, I'm going to have to pay you this.
Exactly amounts.
So that was the confusion, I think, with the range.
Right.
But you cannot say between 3 and 5. You have to know what it is.
And for now, I think everybody is using the FARBAR, buyer brokerage agreements. FARBAR. It's a debate we have internally.
Florida.
Is it
Florida
FARBAR
Realtors.
or when I came on the scene, it was FARBAR. Now it's FARBAR.
Teaching an old dog new tricks.
Right. But I think you're going to see a lot of brokerages go to their own BBAs. For various reasons. I mean, the one that Florida Realtors came out, they did a great job with their forms. I think overall they're very good. They're very broker friendly, and I think that may scare some of the consumers away. They call them consumers now, and not buyers anymore. The consumers. So I think you'll see some of the large brokerages draft their own BBAs. We did. Rose was a big part of drafting a BBA early on for some brokerages. And I've had a lot of brokers reach out to me and say, we like your form better than the Florida Realtor form. And right now we're saying, well, let's just see where this goes. Because I don't know that we want to keep I don't know that we want to have to keep up with updating those forms, right? Like Florida Realtors does.
What are some of the big items like that there's the broker wants or doesn't want versus the FARBAR?
I mean, there were some more protections. It made it there's some parts in the buyer broker agreement that the Florida Realtors put out that a lot of brokers were just like, that's not for us. We don't want that. I think one of the sections was they can enter into a new agreement with a family member, and you can be kicked out after months of work. Let me find
some of the brokers we talked to want it to be a little more broker friendly, but a lot of them have said no, soften it. Soften it, make it a little more consumer friendly, right? Because at the end of the day, do you really want to work with a buyer that doesn't want to work with you?
Right.
But there was a section in the protection period, that last sentence, it says that so they can wait out the termination period, and then once it expires, have my mom or my brother-in-law write an offer, and then my agent is out of the picture, even though they showed me the property, because it says that consumer's obligation to pay broker's fee ceases upon consumer entering into good faith exclusive buyer broker agreement with another broker after termination date. So I showed them that property, but now this is over.
You got
because
2 weeks
I'm
left in
under
your agreement.
A contract with my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Or a day left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could be a day away from the termination agreement. So there, like I said, it's going to take some time for the dust to settle, and every day something new is coming out. I don't know, Rose, if I even talked to you about this, but there are a couple brokerages in, I think it's Michigan, that filed a lawsuit yesterday. Did you see that one? Another antitrust suing NAR in the MLS, saying you're forcing us to be realtors, to be members of the National Association of Realtors in order to access MLS data, and that's anti-competitive. So I mean, there's gonna be, and you've got some states that are pushing back, like Colorado, that are saying we think that forcing a buyer to sign a buyer brokerage agreement is not in the best interest of the consumer. So I think you're going to see some states push back. You're going to see more lawsuits out of
Massachusetts got one. Penn is their MLS. They've got one going on too. Yeah.
But going back to your question about another provision in here that some brokerages didn't like, was the Florida Realtors form says that you can pull the consumer's credit report. And a lot of them are like, yikes, we don't want to do that. So my response to them was, well, just strike through that and let them know, look, I'm not going to pull your credit. So it could be a talking point like, look, this is the Florida Realtors form. I'm not going to do this, and you can strike through that.
I heard that. Now you're saying it, and I'm thinking, like, why? Because you're not getting their date of birth, social, and all those things. Like I would as a lender. Why would
I don't know why they put that in there?
Yeah, why that would even.
I mean, I think sometimes when you wonder if does this person really have the funds to see, a multi-million-dollar home, it gives the agent
maybe it
the
gets
option.
the conversation started, but
And when you go see homes,
or I can require you to be pre-approved, right?
Right.
That's really what they're
Help
saying.
them get approval.
Yeah, that someone's looked at your stuff. All right, this kind of tailoring off of, we've got some different forms here, and I think these different forms are also going to tailor into one of the big discussions we've been talking about is the open house situation. But we have three. We have the property or pre-touring agreement or property pre-touring agreement. There's actually a showing agreement, and then the exclusive buyer broker agreement. Rose, could you just kind of break down a little quick on what?
So there's the buyer broker agreement. There's 4 different versions released. It's just the brokerage relationship that's different on that. That's the one that I'm the proponent of. I think, and David and I differ on this, but I think that the buyer broker agreement, it protects the parties better. The thing I would caution you about that is don't make your location area too small, because if you just do it to one subdivision, but then they find a house across the street, just be careful with that, and don't be vague with it. Don't say, south of I-10 or the Gulf Coast, So just be careful when filling it out. But the buyer broker agreement, that is the one that, if you watch the videos, they're saying that's the one that we're married. But you can still use it to be like a showing agreement or a property pre-touring agreement just by limiting it to one property if you are in that situation
or 1 week or
1 week. You can limit it to not scare off or intimidate a buyer, but I don't think it's intimidating. I don't know if it's because I'm used to looking at agreements, but it's not intimidating if you present it so that it's not intimidating, So I think agents really need to work on their presentation. And I know brokerages in town that have been preaching about the buyer broker agreement for years. For years, they've been preaching the buyer broker agreement and training their agents on how to present it. Once you understand it and are able to present it, it's not intimidating. So I'm a big proponent of using that in every situation. There's also the showing agreement that you mentioned. It's very similar to the buyer broker agreement, not as robust. It doesn't have as much teeth, not as many protections, but it complies with the practice changes. It checks the boxes, so you can use it. There's nothing wrong with it. Mm-hmm. I prefer the BBA.
And then you've got the property pre-touring agreement, which is like going on a date that day.
If you sign the
But in my opinion, that one's a little ambiguous.
If you sign the one-nighter agreement,
I'm not a one-nighter type of person, I guess.
And the next morning you're like, hey, let's go to Vegas.
Yeah.
Do you have to advance that to the full-fledged exclusive buyer broker agreement?
It depends. The property pre-touring agreement has a range, a date range in there as well. At some point, you're going to want to transition once you're comfortable. But I can see, to Rose's point, yes. Are we scared away from the BBA as lawyers? No, but there are definitely things as a lawyer I'm also going to strike through and want initialed if I'm the consumer. So the pre-touring agreement is a little bit less intimidating for certain buyers that maybe are nervous about this. Mm-hmm. And you say, let me show you houses through the weekend, see if you like me. And odds are, if you're a good agent and you know what you're doing, after the weekend, they're going to be like, I really like working with you. Okay, I feel a lot better about this now. And you say, great. So this BBA, we just got to do it. NAR settlement, explain the reason behind it, everything. You've got your elevator pitch about why they should work with you, right? Which hopefully all the buyers agents have by now. So, and then you transition into something like that. So I think it's just a matter of knowing who you're working with and reading the audience.
It's a good transition for those who are, asked the question, because there were several agents asked the question, what's the best way to simply and compliantly explain this? Maybe you start with the...
Yeah, I think it just depends on how you meet the person. Was there a prior relationship? Did you just meet them, casually at a coffee shop and they're not quite ready to commit to you yet and you don't want to throw a 4-page form in front of them and start? I just think it's going to be a case-by-case basis. Mm-hmm. If you can get a BBA signed right off the bat, great. If all you can do is get the pre-touring agreement, if as an agent that's your comfort level at this particular time,
it checks the box.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, I would say check with your broker. That is my final answer, would be check with your broker. But of course, I am going to say too that the pre-touring agreement does have a provision in here that says if you wish to work with broker to purchase a property, broker may ask you to sign a separate agreement detailing the parties' responsibilities during the sale. So why not just do the buyer-broker agreement to begin with? That's my 2 cents. But of course, check with your broker, and it checks the boxes, so it works. Not my preference.
All right. So big discussion around. So we got these documents. We got the 3 different levels of agreements you can do. The open house, and I'm going to kind of set the stage, so to speak. Open house. That person hosting is seen as a representative of the seller. That when someone comes in, as any host would, the expectation of the industry and how real estate works is they would show the house. At what point, because the agents are, at what point is someone's in there, and bless them if someone walks in and says, I want to buy this house, and you're there and they're unrepresented, do we start talking about one of these agreements?
I think that is a great question. Thank you for asking it. And I would like to remind everyone to check out the frequently asked questions on the NAR website.
Florida
Realtors website regarding the NAR settlement. There's a question right on point about it. And it goes to, you have to remember, what are the practice changes? We have to enter into, one of them is entering into a buyer-broker agreement before touring a property when working with the buyer. So now it comes to, what does working with the buyer mean? Okay. There's an answer in here that says that if it is your own listing and you are providing services strictly for the seller, someone comes in, you answer general questions about the property that a normal person coming to an open house asks, they see the property, no buyer-broker agreement required. But once, and there's a little gray area, but once they start asking, they're not represented, and they start asking you for a contract or want to submit an offer or advice, once you go there, stop, time out, let's talk buyer-broker agreement. Right. And let me see, I think it's
and one of the questions,
some
of the questions like they brought up is like, someone walks into their house, they see it, obviously they like it. Would the seller take less? Now you're starting to work with the buyer.
Yeah, I think anytime you're answering a question like that, you're working with the buyer, and you got to be especially careful if you're a single agent for the seller, which a lot of agents are single agents in town, and I think with the changes you're going to see more of that, not less. I think so. But at that point you've got to stop, and depending on single agent, my transaction, do I have the consent to transition to a transaction agent? So it starts to get in the gray area there. And what do you do when that buyer says, I love it, I want to write up an offer, and they're not, and that buyer has told you that they're not represented? Immediately it's and again, depending on whether you're a single agent, I got to get back and check with the seller. Can that agent write up the contract on behalf of the seller and just hand it to the buyer with a no brokerage disclosure and say, hey, I'm giving this to you on behalf of my seller, and hire an attorney, whatever. So it's just it's a lot of gray.
What would you say? Because there's that step back. Like, okay, I got to bring in someone else, right? Like, whether or coming back with that question, would you like me to represent you as well in this transaction? Yes, or if they don't want to be represented by anyone, that's their choice, right?
And can you represent them if you are a single agent?
And then, right.
And you don't have a consent to transition, so...
I don't have Howard Flashin in here right now, so I know he probably, and I want to ask him this question. So how would you transition if you are a single agent? How would you you got someone who's hot and ready to make an offer? Are you calling your broker and having another agent come in from the brokerage and represent? How do you handle it?
I think usually they have the consent to transition signed in advance. When they do the single agent, there's a consent to transition that's signed. So for when this situation,
they just got to let them know that I'm now representing the seller as well.
Unless you have a seller that doesn't authorize it.
Right.
Because there is that, and I want to make point, because this was a big discussion the other day, the working with versus just, hey, telling about the area. You're selling the house for the seller. You're going to tell them all the great things about the house. And when you go, a hot water heater was just changed, the roof was only 3 years old. Those are all things that you would be as representing the host as you're representing the seller.
Providing access to the buyer and answering general questions about the property. That's it. If you do anything more than that, you need to think about buyer broker agreement.
I think this is probably one of my things here, but recommending the brokers, you mentioned that it's up to the broker in previous conversations, but if the broker hasn't really started setting down some of the best practices that they want the agents to go through, and the agents are just going to get probably pretty confused and start running around with their chickens with their head cut off. Like, what are we supposed to do? The broker really needs to try to get a hold of their people and like, this is the way we're going to do it here at this brokerage.
And the Florida Realtors has all the forms. Their website is a great resource tool that everybody should be checking out. It explains the forms. There's videos that you can watch. Call your local real estate attorneys for guidance, because there are pitfalls. You don't want to be the one who is not prepared, who submits an offer without a compensation agreement. And so read the forms, watch the videos, check with your broker, call the hotline, call your favorite real estate attorney. There's things you can do. There's resources out there. Educate yourselves. And check with your broker.
David, you've been in this a couple of decades. You've seen, there's been other changes, maybe not as drastically related directly to
not as drastic, but there have been a few others.
But this is going to be a work through process. Would you agree?
It's just going to take.
Some of these forms may change.
It's going to be rocky.
Yeah.
It's gonna. You're going to see the forms change as new situations arise. You're going to see new laws passed in states to deal with this. So it's just going to take some time. I just tell agents, be patient. Just, when problems arise, like Rose said, give us a call. We'll work through it with you. Work through it with your broker. Call the legal hotline if you can get through to them. I'm sure those phone lines are going to be jammed.
But Tracy, can I just say, you know what I love? This settlement did not prohibit sellers from paying. It did not prohibit listing agents from paying. It did not say that we can't do this anymore. So we're still getting, the result is the same. The path is different. We've said that 100 times. So there are a lot of good things that we still have. We can't negotiate it on MLS. There are other alternatives, a lot. And I think some are better because now it's a private negotiation, one-on-one, depending on the terms of the offer, the strength of the offer. This is better for consumers. This is better for buyers. This is better for sellers. I might be a minority here, and I don't mean to upset people, but there's a lot of good that came from this lawsuit that people are not thinking about because they're just stressed out about, we have to do things different now. But it's not necessarily bad or worse. If you're educated about what's really happening.
As a group, be better at the listing appointment. You can take a lot of weight off a lot of people by being really good listing appointment and 100%. Explaining that up front that, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to do this for the buyer's agent and be really good versus just saying, hey, because we know a lot of sellers did not know that half of their whatever was roughly half all the time is going to the buyer's agent. They just didn't even know that. Same way the buyers did not know the buyer's agent was getting paid that way. And we're just putting that out on the street.
100%. And when you are in your listing, I didn't know if we were going to do some do's and don'ts, but when you are in that listing appointment, one thing you don't want to do is suggest to a seller that they must make a certain offer of compensation or no broker will show your house. Do not do that. There are other ways that you can say that, with your experience in the real estate industry, if you set the price here, or if we want to, you're always looking at the net. And we at Landmark, we have a net sheet where we could give you 3 different price points. So you can have an informative conversation with your seller and letting them know, look, who cares what we do, how it gets divided? We're looking at the net here. Okay. And that's, it's all about making them understand. I don't think they really care who gets paid as long as what's coming home and the check is the same,
Right. Well, I think one of the phrases in sales, what you focus on, they will focus on. And if you focus on this, but David, in your experience, 20 plus years in Northeast Florida, or really in real estate in general, the price that's been driving for these homes this was all part of that structure, that they know that certain percentage is going over here and certain percentage is going over here, and some closing cost and the seller's responsibilities and that sort of thing. These were already built in. So I think, would you agree, like as a listing agent in the buy, having that mindset that price has already built this into it, because I think there's this miscommunication with the DOJ thinking that housing, we're pumping up the values of homes because of this. And
but I mean, time will tell, but I don't think that it's going to change that much. There might be a little compression on buyer's agent side commissions, but I think like anything else, it's going to be market driven. It's going to be supply and demand. And when it's a seller's market, you'll see sellers say, I'm only paying 2% buyer's agent commission. I'm only going to pay you 2, so 4. And then when it's a buyer's market, they're going to say, man, you're really worth it. I'm going to pay 6, 3, and 3. So it's a conversation that just has to be had. It's driven by market forces. It's going to be how good that agent is at selling themselves. We've been preaching to agents when we've been talking to them over the last few months. You have to add value to a transaction. I mean, I don't care what field you're in or what you do for a living. If you add value, you will always have a seat at the table.
And you do add value very much, and we see it. We know the agents that add value much more than some that don't. We see the agents that are going and saving the day at the last minute because they had a contact somewhere and they were able to get the situation resolved and fixed and get the appraisal and order the inspection. So you
clean
have
out
a lot
garages.
of value.
Yeah. So as long as you're,
minute.
There's a lot of anxious agents that are very anxious about this, and I understand because it's the fear of the unknown. But we just keep telling them, if you add value, and you do add value, you just need to convey that, how you add value, why. Listing agents have been conveying their value for years.
That's why the Real Estate Excellence Podcast exists.
Yeah,
is to come on and express your value.
They're not top producing agents by accident. They know how to walk into a living room and tell a seller why they should list and sell their house with them, and they will get them top dollar. So it's just something new that buyer's agents now have to sit down with a buyer and say, this is why I'm going to help. This is how I'm going to help bring value to you. This is how I'm going to help you get the price at maybe lower than market value than what you think. And I bring, the contacts that I have in home inspection and survey and lending and all these things that are going to help add value to your transaction. So it's just going to take some getting used to on the part of buyer's agents to do that. And there are a lot of buyer's agents, frankly, that did not add a lot of value. And I don't think they'll be in the industry much longer.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing for all the agents that we deal with that you talk to on your podcast that are professionals and that are in this seriously for the long term, not trying to do it part-time.
One of the things that Florida Realtors put out is they don't expect you to do it for free. The settlement agreement was not, you need to bring about, but there comes a challenge with fair housing and so forth, because we know there's buyers out there that don't have, we've got to get concessions, or they're using down payment assistance and so forth. And that going and asking for, whether it's in the offer, asking for buyer agent compensation, or the listing agent, when you're listing a house, in this area, 200, 250, you're probably those are first time home buyer homes that you need to understand who is your buyer and what most of them coming to the table with. And they generally don't have a lot of the extra cash to pay their buyer's agent, and cover all the closing costs and if any down payment that they have, that understanding the clients that you're working with.
Yeah, I think 100% they're saying the opposite. You're not working for free. Here's a buyer broker agreement showing all your value, what you're worth, and that you will, they're guaranteeing you to get paid by having a written agreement. And don't just put it in the contract, because the contract is between the buyer and the seller. So we were talking earlier this morning too, that we are recommending that agents memorialize the agreement in the purchase and sale agreement, in the contract, but you always have to have that separate compensation agreement, so that if for whatever reason you don't get paid, the contract's not going to protect you because you're not a party to that contract. You have to have that compensation agreement with either the seller or the listing broker or the buyer, whoever's going to pay you, for you to be able to enforce it.
Yeah, and please, as a best practice, agents, put it in the purchase contract. So if you are a buyer's agent and you know you're getting 2% from the seller and you're going to get 1% from the buyer, in the closing cost section for the buyer, put the dollar amount payable to XYZ brokerage. And in the seller closing cost amount, put the 2% payable to XYZ brokerage. That way it's in the contract, because the situation, and it's going to happen, is where we're going to have a selling agent say, oh, I'm only getting 2 from the seller and I've got a BBA with the buyer for 3%, so charge 1% to the buyer. And it's not going to be in the contract. And then we're going to tell the buyer, hey, we told by the selling agent to put this fee on. The buyer's going to say, I had no idea. They didn't explain that to me. I don't have the money. I'm not paying it. He didn't do a good job. Take it off the Alta. And then us as the title company, now that puts us in a difficult position because it's not part of the contract. Buyer didn't agree contractually to pay for it. That's a separate dispute that they have with the selling agent now. And they've got to go look at the terms of the BBA and the dispute resolution and do that. But you know, if we're instructed by a buyer, take that off. It's not in the contract. I don't authorize it. We're going to take it off the Alta. We don't have a choice. It's not part of the contract, and we're not going to hold up the closing for it. We're going to look at the selling agent and say, you've got a dispute resolution section,
figure it out yourself,
and you got to go. You got to go do it yourself.
So, all right. So let's slow that down so everyone
Well,
that's
I was
listening.
just going to ask you. This is being recorded, right?
Yes.
Okay. So whoever's watching, please rewind and watch that again. Because if you are going to take anything else other than the first thing that I said, if you're going to take anything, make sure you have the compensation agreement signed before or simultaneously with your purchase and sale agreement offer being submitted. Make it contingent. And now the second thing, if you don't take anything else away from this podcast, is what David just said. So just rewind it and watch it again. It is very important what we're telling agents to memorialize the compensation in the purchase and sale agreement. Because if we're in a situation where we're ready to close and we sent out the Alta, because we always do it at Landmark Title. We always sent it in advance of closing, and the buyer's looking at it. Whoa, I did not know I was paying 1%. We are in a position where, we don't want to tell you that we can't do it, but they're going to be in default if they don't close. So most likely we will close and you will not get paid, and you will have to pursue a cause of action if you want to.
The situation that was the buyer broker agreement, they put 3% for this example.
Mm-hmm.
The seller was only going to pay 2%. So you got 1% still hanging out there that the buyer is still responsible for. They either obviously can have that conversation with the buyer, and the buyer might say, yeah, no problem, I understand, I'm going to pay you that 1%, or you amend the buyer broker agreement. Would you agree?
Sure, you could do that, or you put it in the purchase contract on the buyer closing cost section that they're paying the 1%, and then it's part of the contract. And if the buyer complains about it, we say, I'm sorry, it's in the contract that you're going to pay them. Mm-hmm. Just like it's in the contract that you're going to pay the lender's title policy or the note stamps or the survey, right? It's part of the contract. And we don't get in that situation where a buyer says, I don't care what that BBA says. It's not in the contract. Take it off.
Yeah.
Help us help you. Please.
The one thing was, from what I understand, the MLSs are going to, they're taking out the compensation part in there. They are going to add where you can put in concessions, but you are not allowed to say in the concessions that were anything going to the buyer agent.
Right. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought this up, because seller concessions cannot be conditioned on payment to a broker. Okay. So they cannot be conditioned on it. But if you put a seller concession in MLS, you're putting it out there for every single buyer, and they can use it for whatever they want. Mm-hmm. So yes, that is an option. You can put it out there. If you have sellers that they want to do that, they're more than welcome to, but it's going to be on there for all the offers that come in. It's not the way that I would recommend doing it, but it's an option.
So what's common, and there's lenders in town that do it, that they offer concession for either to buy down the rate or compensate their closing costs. buyer broker comp is not part of closing costs or settlement costs. Am I correct? That this question just came to my mind.
You're correct on that, and there are some frequently asked questions that talk about this. And I believe the VA and FHA also came out with guidelines that are saying that they're not going to count it toward the maximum allowed.
Right. But I'm just saying because they can put in their advertisement that, hey, you can buy down, you can use this money to buy down the rate or just pay for the closing costs or a combination of. But that doesn't mean that money's supposed to go to the buyer's agent.
It doesn't mean it, but you can use it for that.
You can.
You can.
Okay.
But like Rose said, I mean, that's not the way that I would recommend that it be handled by the seller.
A topic that was brought up at the mastermind on Friday was, and I know I have my personal opinion on this. I will clearly state it, having worked with a large builder in town, and it's not this builder that particular that I'm talking about, but and then one of the questions, actually by a very prominent agent out at the beach, she sent me the question because it was a Facebook. Can a listing agent require to see your buyer broker agreement to show you the house?
No.
I wouldn't think that's a very good practice.
I don't.
Well,
I don't know where it's stated, but I don't think that's good practice.
Well, here's my thing. You got to remember the code of ethics.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to work as a listing agent for your seller's best interest. So is it in your seller's best interest to not show a house?
Right.
I mean, it puts you at a disadvantage because now you're seeing what that
violation.
buyer is paying their buyer's broker. And I can't imagine the listing agent's going to do it. I guess we're about to find out.
Mm-hmm.
But the buyer broker certainly can say, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I would definitely defer.
I would push
to your
back.
broker, the ethics hotline. This, to me, does not sit well, and I would not think it would be allowed under the ethics rules to condition showing a house on you showing a buyer broker agreement.
Again, discussions, I think it was probably on Friday as well. You have that situation where because I think what they're doing is trying to take advantage of a weak buyer's agent who's not like I'll do this for 1%. So they see that 1%. Oh, great, we'll pay you 1%, no problem. Instead of they want to expose the cards. They want to see the cards before they lay down their cards, so to speak. And I just where my thoughts going here is, should they put in that buyer's broker agreement? Hey, you can get paid up to 5% if the seller's willing to pay all of it or 3% of that. But
you can't because, again, that's not objectively.
That would be a range.
Right. That would violate that.
You wouldn't want it open-ended. Now, the one suggestion I was like, well, why don't you put in there if this, because I brought up builder. There's a builder in our region who has stated the same thing. They want to see the buyer broker agreement first. To me, it's a lazy builder who's unwilling to go see what the other builders are doing and be competitive. They want the cards to be exposed to see if they could save themselves a couple bucks. Could they put in that agreement? If it's an existing home, I'll pay you 2%. Mm-hmm. If it's a builder, because of all the incentives, I'll allow you to get up to 5%.
Yes.
Because in most of these agents are talking about that they're willing to take, in most cases, the lesser of the two of what the seller's willing to give them, the builder or seller, right? If they ask for 3, they say they're going to pay 3, but they only got 2. Most of the agents are like, they'll just take the 2 and they'll put an addendum to buyer broker agreement or not even asking for the difference because they're wanting to put that in their buyer broker agreements.
So brokers have asked us for language, and we provided it to them with a disclaimer that we really don't know whether it would pass DOJ scrutiny or be in compliance with the practice changes in MLS policy. But we provided language to certain brokers that says that broker will be paid a bonus offered in the amount of, so it's objectively ascertainable, it's not open-ended, 10%, whatever, 10,000 bananas, I don't know, whatever they want to put there.
You're listening to Patty Ketchum too much.
and we say that it'll be paid from the owner's broker or builder. However, such bonus paid to brokers shall not be due from or enforceable against consumers. So we're letting the consumer know, okay, look, we're not going to come after you for this, but you are authorizing us to get a bonus from a builder in the amount of 10% of the purchase price. We're not going to come after you for it, but if we do get it, guess what? We're going to credit you for the amount that you said you owed us in the preceding paragraph.
Right.
It's a win-win. I don't see how this benefits the consumer, but we are giving it with a disclaimer and deferring them to their broker on whether or not they should use this in their agreements, and calling the hotline.
Yeah, I mean, a builder who's willing to pay a bonus, how is that hurting the consumer? It's not hurting the consumer. They're willing to pay it. They're going to pay it no matter who shows up.
I would think in the DOJ's minds, they're jacking up the price to. That's what they would think, in my opinion.
But
not if the builder's willing to do it. I mean, they're saying we'll do it. We want to sell this house so bad. We got 10 houses sitting on this subdivision. We need to move them.
If you, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit, and you can say no comment if you don't, because.
Thanks for doing it to him, not me.
He was looking at you.
No, he was looking at you.
Yeah, I'm looking at David. In my opinion, if I was some influencer, say at NEFBA, I would call that builder and say, dude, you don't want to do that. These agents are under enough scrutiny right now. Asking for their buyer broker agreement is just going to create animosity.
So that is a fact. That's not a hypothetical. That of a builder that is asking for that.
That was stated in a room with 40 other realtors.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know why it should matter. Why should it matter?
Well, because what Tracy said. I mean, they want to see that you were only that you were doing it for 2%, and they're offering 3%, and now they know they can save 1% because you agreed to 2%.
Yeah. I think I just don't see that catching on. I hope that there's more of a spirit of cooperation, and I think. I don't know which builder that is, and you don't have to tell me. No one mentioned that. Well, they did, but I forgot who it was.
But, everybody knows what one of the major national builders did a few years ago during COVID, right? Almost slashed commissions to 0, if not 0. So this goes back to my early comment about things being market-driven somewhat.
Right.
But, can they do it or should they do it? There are two different questions. There, like Rose said, there may be an ethical violation there that I'm not aware of asking for that.
There's no legal requirement to disclose it.
Right.
If anything, it would be to not disclose it because it's a private agreement between the parties,
brokers and the buyers.
You need authorization to disclose it.
I think the builders, and just to address this specific one, I think they advertise what they're paying in a co-broker commission, right? So I think you'd have time to amend your BBA and say, sure, here it is. I saw on your website that you're paying, because I think they're all going to advertise it.
I just don't.
They'd be crazy not to advertise it somewhere. So you could always adjust it real quick and send it. I see it being a problem more on the resale side. Sorry.
I think I prefer your way of doing it, Tracy, of putting in there, if it's new build, it's 10%, and then you're covered.
Right.
Yeah. But if it's a resale and you've got a listing agent, if it's a resale and you have a listing agent says, I got to see your BBA before you show my property. You say, what are you paying in co-broker commission? And, maybe they advertised it on their website, maybe some other way. And then, again, you could always modify your BBA to increase it to that amount and then say, sure, here it is, or here's a new one that's signed. I just don't think it's going to be the norm. I really hope not, because it's hard enough out there without agents coming at each other like that. And I think 95% plus agents work really well together. There is that 5%. I think agents know who they are, and but I hopefully there's.
Well, I think you could think about it this way. If you're listing the house, and I have to show you my buyer's broker agreement just to see the house, and my buyer's broker agreement wants too much, then you're willing to. Whatever you think I don't know what you think you're getting into. What are you going to say? You can't see the house? You can't make an offer on a house? Now you got a fair housing violation, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
potentially, yes.
I like the idea, and that's why I keep going back to the pie slice, because that's a forum where you can go and have what the whole spirit of this settlement is, of negotiating one-on-one per property, per offer. You know, it's a term that should be negotiated. It's a negotiable term.
We're going to get Rose a pie slice t-shirt. So, yeah, she can get on the videos. I think we might have answered this question before, but I can't remember if it was pre-show, but very affluent agent here in town. She feels she's confident that the seller will pay her commission. Can she put 0? I think we answered that question, or leave it blank on the buyer's broker. There has to be something in there. Whether it's a dollar amount or percentage, something.
No, per the practice changes, you are not allowed to get paid anything more from any source than what is disclosed and authorized in the buyer broker agreement.
So if you put 0, 0 is your number.
That's all you're allowed
You'd have to modify. You'd have to amend the buyer broker agreement to increase it, and then show the house and write the contract. And that certainly could be done.
Rose, you have the exclusive buyer broker agreement.
I do.
And there are some agents that were confused at the bottom of section 14 there. There's that last line there where, because it's a situation where the broker actually has the listing as well as the buyer, and the seller's paying the broker one thing and the buyer's paying the broker a thing. And that's really what it's saying, is for services that the broker provides the seller, they are compensated separately.
Exactly. So I think this, again, full disclosure, this is in the acknowledgement section. The buyer is acknowledging that the broker, if it's like working as on behalf of the seller, that they can receive separate compensation from the owner for the services that they're rendering to the owner, for which the buyer, the consumer, is not responsible. So it's a disclosure.
When it first came out, before FAR clarified what they meant by it, I think a lot of people were like, is this trying to cover the bonus, right? Is this trying to say that the owner can give a bonus? But FAR came out and clarified, no, what they meant by that was situations where the broker is working both sides.
Because it says for services rendered to the owner.
Rose and I were laughing a little bit about this, but this, it's if they hold their breath long enough, will these forms go away? Do you think the forms? I don't think they're going to go away.
I don't want
They're
them
only going to be modified.
I don't want them to go away. This is not a.
You have enough work. Are you paying her more now because we got more forms?
Right.
That's right.
It's job security.
It really is.
We talked about they can create their own buyer's agreement. I'm just going down, make sure we covered a lot. The purpose of the when we talked about range, how do you word the seller to pay compensation in the sales contract? How do you word a seller to pay compensation in the sales contract? You were talking about a little bit. They should just clearly state it.
Put in the seller closing cost section. That's it.
That line there says other, check it.
Other, if there's not enough room, because whatever, you can put it in the paragraph 20 additional terms. But we would love it if every single contract that we get has the commission in the contract. That's how it is in commercial contracts. That's how, it used to be as like a footnote in the NEFAR contract years ago, sort of an FYI, informational purposes only thing, but we'd love to just have it in the contract. I think that's, talk about transparency, doesn't get much more transparent than that.
But just to reiterate, to make sure no one misses it, you still need a compensation agreement signed, because the contract is between the buyer and the seller. You're not a party to it. You can't enforce it. So you still need, it's not in lieu of, it's in addition to.
I think I've covered every question. I hope I did. I hope I didn't leave any agents out. A lot of you texted me. And
I see the phone lines are blowing up.
Well, I thought about actually putting a phone, but I'm using my phone as a camera here. So I thought about, we'll just put David's number out there and let them all just text David during the show, right?
He won't mind.
Off.
Anything else that you could think of that maybe we didn't discuss here in the last hour? that possibly come up. I like putting it in the contract because there was a lot of agents asking about, what is our recourse, right? Outside, but if you have an agreement and you haven't come, put it right in the sales thing. So, and obviously it makes it easier for the title company to disperse funds. Boom, it's there. Yeah.
I did some do's and don'ts. I'm trying to go through them, see if there's anything in here that we didn't cover. But, the number one do was, implement the practice changes. August 17th is this Saturday. Save copies of your buyer broker agreement. Get with your broker on that. They are enforcing it. So
how did they actually come out? Like for lenders, a lot of stuff is like 5 years. Did they actually come out and say you need to hold on this buyer broker agreement for a period of time?
I didn't see that, but
no, I didn't see a particular. I would say it's whatever you have to hang on to the other forms for. Whatever 475 says, however many years you've got to hang on to that stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And remember to don't cheat the system. You don't want to be a victim of an attorney in the next round of lawsuits. Let's not get creative right now. Let's do what we're supposed to do. Attorneys will send testers. Like, I don't know if you know about the Americans with Disability Acts, the ADA litigation cases where they send testers to see who was in violation. They're probably going to do that and send fake tester buyers to see if you are doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you don't want your name in the next round of lawsuits because you're not following the practice changes.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me, just like bank secrecy acts and so forth, that it's going to come down the line that these MLSs do so many tests. The test what's going on out there if their agents are actually following the rules.
Yeah, and there are fines. We saw someone sent you a text message the other day where someone got fined because they put in
the private remarks, they put in text listing agent for buyer brokerage comp.
Yeah.
Boom.
Well, that
$1,000
be
fine.
careful.
And
Don't do it.
we talked a little bit about it because we talked about Pie Slice, but several agents talking about how should they communicate. And from what I understand, you guys correct me, as long as they're not using something, whether it's related to the MLS, they can call each other, they can text each other, email, whatever, however they want to communicate with the other agent on how the compensation, and then obviously you can make an offer and everything's negotiable.
Exactly. What else? Reminder to include agent compensation terms in the contract in addition to having the compensation agreement signed, not in lieu of it. Understand the Florida Realtors forms. Know how to fill them in. There are traps if you don't know what you're doing, especially with the listing agreement. If you have questions, call the hotline, watch the videos, call your favorite real estate attorney. Be careful because if you don't know what you're doing, you could mess up.
Right.
And it could cost you.
Patty Ketchum has that video on Florida Realtors YouTube, and she gives out her cell phone number.
Yes,
Does she really?
Miss Florida Real Estate, I can't believe she did that. I don't know how many calls.
She's awesome.
Hotline.
She's awesome.
What else?
Knowing if anyone has not watched that video, Florida Realtors YouTube, go on there. Patty breaks it down, shows you line by line these documents, the exclusive buyer's agreement, what to fill out, how to fill it out, some best practices.
This was one that I don't think we talked about. I said don't in the don't section. Don't have a blanket statement on your website that says you offer buyer broker commissions on every listing.
We're friendly. Yeah.
Because that's not consistent with the spirit of the settlement, and you don't want to have any pre-printed forms with the compensation filled in already. Right. Compensation is negotiable.
Watching Juanita at Florida Realtors, she recommended, don't do that. And EXP, their lawyer was talking with some of the leadership there, and it's expected. That's actually, you don't have to put that out there that you're friendly to the buyers. Hopefully you're friendly to the buyer's agent. Type of thing. You don't have to actually.
And this might be the lawyer in me, but I put in here: don't put anything on social media that you wouldn't want read to a jury if you were on trial. Putting that out there. Putting that out there. I don't know. I always like to CYA.
Start adding that to the bottom of your documents.
Remember, don't condition seller concession on use for broker's compensation. We've talked about that. Don't charge a range of compensation. Has to be specific, objectively ascertainable. And then the last one was don't forget to send the required disclosures. I don't think we touched on this. And amend your listing and your buyer broker agreements. If they were signed before August 17th. So that's something if you have...
Very good point. So you have a listing right now. It's out there right now. You need to have that adjusted.
You want to make sure it's in compliance with the practice changes, that the disclosures are in there, that commissions are fully negotiable, not set by law. And if you were using an old form of the listing agreement and there was a section in there that says that offers that it can't go on MLS without there being an offer of compensation, that has to be deleted. And there is a form for it that you can use. So just make sure you go through and check all your listings, all your buyer broker agreements.
And you're representing your buyer's agents. If they're showing houses on Saturday, need to have one of the 3 forms.
Right. You want to make sure that you have the current version of the forms that you're using. And that's the other thing, with the Florida Realtors website, make sure you're staying on top of it. There's updates constantly. So just stay in the loop and watch your favorite podcast, listen to your favorite podcast, and stay in the know.
I did put it in the thing because all the top agents, I'm asking how they're handling this, now. And I think a lot of them, it shows up in the questions because obviously a lot of the questions came from a lot of people been on the podcast. That now all of a sudden, it's midnight.
Nope.
I got to do
it. Is, yeah.
Now they really have to think about it. But Landmark, you guys are out there educating. Just let's finish with that. What are you guys doing for the community?
Follow us on Eventbrite, landmarktitle.com. We don't spam you with recipe of the week. It's the events that we are putting on, that we are hosting, usually at our training facility at Financial Way. On social media, we have trainings that we are doing with third parties that we're sponsoring, things like that.
Tomorrow, actually, for those listening live, I think a representative from Real Brokerage, right?
Yeah, Real is in our office tomorrow. We'll be sitting with them. On Thursday, Jennifer Hendry with Game Changers, who's fantastic. Right. She loves to train. That teaching is her thing. And I'm sitting with Jennifer going over BBA stuff. We're still doing a ton of FAR bar training. Just follow us. We're big on education. Right. I said if you provide value, you'll always have a seat at the table. That's why I don't ever worry about Landmark and our closers and attorneys, because we go out of our way to provide value, give it away for free, and I know that we add value, and so that's why we continue to grow and pick up agents. So good.
And just so you all know, Landmark Title has a team, a whole legal team dedicated to answering agents' questions. We do not handle, my team does not handle closings. We are just support. He pays my team and I just to be available to help agents, to answer questions. Anytime you call Landmark, someone will answer the phone and help you. Yeah. So we don't have files. My team does not have files. We are just support for the processing teams and for the real estate agents.
Rose, would you recommend,
and the buyers and sellers,
recommend not only watch the Florida Realtor videos, but come in to see at different times, multiple times from different people, just like the contract. When you're going over
I had to watch some of the videos twice to make sure I understood things, So the more you hear it, the more it becomes, you become more comfortable with it. You're better to explain it, and then you just get it.
They say you have to hear something 7 times to really process it. 7's what they say.
I didn't have enough time. I found out about this yesterday.
But you can only listen to 7 minutes at a time.
We have agents. that have come to our FAR bar training now 2, 3, and 4 times, and they say, "Okay, I picked up on this. Thank you. I didn't quite get it the first time." Yeah. Talk about drinking from a fire hose. If you're a real estate agent, what you've had to absorb the last few months, you need to constantly keep coming to these, and real teaching BBA skills, and then the next day Game Changers doing it. You've got 2 great brokerages that are just sharing, open to any agent. You don't have to be at their brokerage. They're sharing. And that's what I love about our training room is the collaboration among lenders and real estate agents that use it, that just have open masterminds like what Mike Rolowitz does once a month. Fantastic. And you have such a cross-section of agents from all over Northeast Florida, all kinds of different price points. Some of the biggest brokerages in town show up for his mastermind. And there's no sales, it's nothing. It's just, what are your pain points? What are you dealing with? How can we noodle this together? And we've got a lot of that goes on in the training room.
And we have a bunch of training rooms. We have the main training room, and then we have other boardrooms, and we call it a war room for people
topic
to come
of where the conversation leads might be just one thing. And this, what was discussed last Friday at the mastermind, which I took from and researched. There's so many different things, and here, just a few days, I probably could have drilled, if I put it out to 100 people, I'd probably have 200 questions of different questions, because there's still questions out there. So you got to go to these trainings. And
even the forms that FAR came out with, that's their interpretation of the settlement, right? Other attorneys are going to have other interpretations. So it's and other brokers may have other stricter or less strict interpretations of it. So it's definitely not
where they see weak points. One person's weak point over here might be different for another attorney over there.
Because this didn't create any new law. It's just new rules that NAR has, and what we think. DOJ could come back and say, we don't think you went far enough. Yeah. We're going to go even further. So we still just don't know. It's all about educate yourself, bring value to the transaction, and you'll be fine.
Yep.
I agree. I concur.
Appreciate you guys coming on.
Thank you
for having us. We really appreciate it.
All right, those still listening, please
pleasure.
like and subscribe. This will be on YouTube as well. It's going to air live on Apple Podcast and all the other platforms on Friday, the 16th. So you'll have it there if you want to listen to Corey. You haven't been seeing the whole thing on the video today. So I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you.